Okay, good morning, everybody. So let me start by saying this. Welcome to the 18th annual Public Safety and Community Appreciation Lunch for the County of Sacramento. Thank you all for being here today. And I will say this, happy Cinco de Mayo. I'm going to be honest and tell you that I truly look forward to this day every year because for those of us in this room, we all work in challenging life's professions, but today is a day that we celebrate. We celebrate all the good work of public safety, their associations, all the good work of community partners that are here today, and all of it that we do on a daily basis in our community to make us a healthy and safe community. And so today is a day of celebration. It's a day for us to respect the work that we all do, the fact that we all are trying to move forward, and to have a safer community. This event has also evolved into an opportunity to bring our community together and to have conversations about what I would say are emerging issues that we face as a community that have an impact on public safety. And this year, we're going to see something a little bit different, and we're going to get to that a little bit later in the program, but I'm very excited about our panel today to have a conversation about what I hold near and dear to me in my heart, which is how we treat our children in our community. I want to first of all acknowledge that joining us here today are leaders and representatives really from every walk of our society, members of public safety, their associations, legislators, public officials, educators, school administrators, healthcare, legal, business community members, community-based organizations and advocates, public service agency representatives and administrators, and our faith-based community. All of you in this room are incredibly important to our cause. You'll see on our PowerPoint we have a list of all of our dignitaries that have been able to be here with us today, and I thank all of them for being here today. I want to take a couple minutes just to talk about our sponsors. There's no question in our mind that for the last 18 years we could not do this incredible event without our sponsors. And this year we added a new level of what we call our premier sponsors. And this year we have two groups that I want to recognize and ask them to come up. One is Kaiser with Carol Sari. She can come on up. And SAC POA, Tim Davis, come on up. So just a little bit of background. Kaiser has been a champion sponsor for this event for the last 8 years. And this year they stepped up as a premier sponsor, which essentially, in my opinion, I would assume has a lot to do with our topic today, which is making sure that we work together as a community to raise healthy children and make us all safer as a community. We're also very pleased that Kaiser has allowed us to have Dr. Michelle Evans from Kaiser to be part of our panel today. And Sacramento Police Officers Association, Tim Davis is their president. They've been one of our champion sponsors since 2001, and we thank them this year for stepping up and again becoming our premier sponsor. So thank you all, and I'd ask you to give them a round of applause for their sponsorship today. And then I want to just take a few minutes to recognize our other sponsors and ask you to hold your applause until the end because we have many, again, that we could not do this without their support. Sacramento County Deputy Sheriff's Association has been here from the beginning. As I call them, they're the OG, the original gangsters, part of this whole public safety event. Sacramento Credit Union has been here in their 6th straight year. The California Alcohol and Beverage Control, what we call the TRACE unit, has been here for their 5th straight year. UC Davis Children's Hospital, as well as UC Davis Healthcare System, has been a sponsor since 2011, and again, they return as a champion sponsor. and Sacramento County area firefighters, Local 522. So Brian Rice's group is here, has been here since 2014. Those are our champion sponsors. So I'd ask us that we give a round of applause to those sponsors as well. We have many, many other sponsors, and they're all listed on your program, and they're listed in the PowerPoint, so I'd ask that you just look at that and realize the dedication that all of you in this room give to us to putting this event on every year. And then lastly, before we start our program, I just want to take a second to acknowledge the tremendous work that it takes to put this event together by our committee of folks that come together to organize this. It does take quite a village to get this going. And I would specifically want to recognize folks from our office, Shelley Oreo, Shelley Cooper, Joni Friedenblum, Ruann Dozier, and Assistant Chief Deputy Natalia Luna, because quite frankly, you can tell by the number of people in this room that there's a reason why so many people come, and I thank them all for helping us with that. So please give them a round of applause. Okay, so we're ready to roll, and so now what I'd like to do is we're going to start with our mutual color guard, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, which I'm very proud to say will be led by my son, Jacob. And also the national anthem, which will be sung by Rachel Dittmore. And so those of you that don't know Rachel, Rachel is a co-founder of a nonprofit in Oak Park called City of Refuge, which does incredible work in our community to help individuals that are engaged in commercial sex trafficking, victims of violence, to help them recover from that lifestyle and lead healthy and happy lives. So at this time, I'd ask that the honor guard, Jacob, and Rachel Dittmar come up, and I'd ask you all to stand for our honor guard.
Detail, attend, hut, port, arm, forward, march. Detail. Halt. Post. Colors. Present. Halt.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Order. On. Ready. Face. Forward. March.
Wow, thank you, Rachel, for that. You're welcome back every year to sing that national anthem for us. At this time, I'd like to invite up Chaplain Mindy Russell to lead us in an invocation.
Well, thank you for letting me do this. I love this luncheon as well. I think this is a time when we can all get together and kind of renew. We all prepare for all the memorials that we're at this week, next week, national. So it's just a wonderful time of refreshing. Amen? So would you join me in a time of prayer? Lord, this luncheon is so special, for it's a gathering of community leaders and first responders. We thank you for the first responders that are in harm's way every day. And we ask that you would protect them, our warriors of justice, our protectors of the innocent, those that are willing to risk their lives. Lord, we thank you for our community leaders and the leadership that they show and the dedication to their community. And we also thank you for the nonprofits and the chaplains that serve by the first responders and the community members when they are at the worst of their lives, their hearts being broken. May they see your peace, and may they know your comfort. And this we pray as we renew and recommit to commitment to duty and fueling for the passion of service. Amen. And unfortunately this year we did lose a California Highway Patrol officer, Officer Chalu. So would you join me in a moment of silence? Amen. And I know Ann's going to say one more thing because I know you're getting tired standing, but at least you're not eating while I'm talking. But I did tell you this year we're going to have different blue ribbons, amen, because antennas are no longer on our car. So we got to the blue ribbon. She's going to talk about it, but thank you and God bless you for all that you do. You may be seated. Thank you. We'll talk about it if you want to.
Thank you, Chaplain Mindy. So for those of you that don't, I would be shocked if you didn't know who Chaplain Mindy is and what the law enforcement chaplaincy does. But I have often described the law enforcement chaplaincy and the members of that organization as what I would say are angels among us. Because it's the law enforcement chaplaincy who are also first responders for fallen officers, their families, first responders for families across this county and across this region that have fallen victim to violence. And they provide, without hesitation, one of the most critical roles that we have as a community, which is to be there in the greatest time of need, in the greatest time of grief, and to help those families and those fallen officers through that difficult period of their lives. And so on your tables, I'm going to push these blue ribbons because today is an opportunity for us to support that organization. And I'm going to remind everybody that's a county employee that today is Payday Friday. I know it's the day after the big day of giving. I got that. But if you have it in your hearts to support such a valiant and noble cause, leave some money for this important organization because they do truly God's work. And so thank you for that. Thank you to Chaplain Mindy for everything that you do. And with that, we're going to take a break. We're going to serve lunch, and then we're going to allow you, if you have time, to go out and see our vendors through the room or outside the door. And then we're going to come back and start our panel discussion. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back in about 20 minutes. Okay, so every year at this luncheon, we have the Sacramento Rotary present the Rotary Service Above Self Award. And this year I'd like to have the Rotary Foundation President Jim Leake come up and do that presentation for us. Jim, are you here? Hi, come on up.
Thank you very much. We're very honored and pleased to be able to award a Service Above Self Award, which we do annually. It is a statement that we make as Rotarians that it does more than just being a participant of the community, but really to deeply involve yourself with it. And each year we recognize a public safety officer who is really the embodiment of the values that we would hope that others would share along the way. And this year we come to recognize Detective Dave Jones, who has been employed by the Citrus Heights Police Department agency since 2006. Dave has done many, many activities, including being very involved in the Police Activities League. In addition, he participates in many, many events and also implements them. He really has a way with children, and he really is looking for a way to have children appreciate their value, to see their potential, and to bring them to being full participants, despite potentially the frustrations that economic disadvantage or poverty may affect them. And Dave is undaunting in his passion and in his effort. He has established his own program, seeing the emerging needs of youth. It's called My Life, and Dave has designed this all-inclusive 8-week youth academy, youth leadership academy, to improve the quality of life in Citrus Heights, and by empowering these young people of various backgrounds by promoting ethics, long-term planning, effective leadership in ways in which they can step beyond their current circumstances and to emerge successfully from them. Dave realized that families are not just raising teenagers, they're raising young adults. And his unique perception as he goes approaching these children, he creates the confidence building and self-coaching in such a way that it's a magnet for the children. They realize that Dave truly values who they are, respects and appreciates them for who they are, and works with them very closely. And I'm honored today to present to Dave Jones, Detective Dave Jones, our Service Above Self Award. And in addition, we provide Detective David Jones with a check for $1,000.
I think it's incredibly fitting that Detective Jones got that award, and the fact that he has become quite a mentor for the children of this community and how well it should fit in with our panel discussion that we have. So you may remember when you got your flyer this year that this year's theme is a little bit different. This theme is what we call health, safety, education, pathways to a stronger community. And we came up with this idea several months ago, and I'm going to tell you kind of how it originated. The first part of it originated I'm going to out my sister here, Beth, because I have a big family. I have 6 siblings in my family, and my sister Beth is what I would call the brainiac of the family. And I don't mean just because she's smart, but because she actually works in a field of neurosurgery and helps doctors with the impact of trauma on the brain. And so 6 to 8 months ago, maybe, she kept telling me, you got to talk to Kaiser, you got to talk to Kaiser, because this really does impact the criminal justice system and the impact of trauma on the brain. And I kept putting it off and putting it off, not because I didn't believe in it, but just because life got a little bit overwhelming at times. And then about 3 or 4 months ago, myself and some other people that are part of a group that tries to keep kids in school had a presentation by an organization called Changing Minds Institute. And it's a campaign that you're going to start seeing a lot, I believe, in this community. I'm very confident it's going to be led by some incredible leaders in this community. But it's a campaign that really is designed for all of us to understand the impact that childhood trauma, whether direct trauma or secondary trauma, has on a child's brain. And what can we do as a community to help that child heal from that trauma, better that child's life, better that family's life, better that community's life, and ultimately make us all healthier and safer. And so that's the origination of this theme today. And with that, I want to start off, we have a tremendous group of panel members. But before I introduce the panel, I'd like to do is start off with a video that's from the Changing Minds Institute, and it's called Chad's Story. And I think you'll understand by watching. It's about a 5-minute clip. And while you watch it, understand what impact that trauma had on that person's life and the power of mentorship in moving that child forward. So with that, can we please start the video?
It's just hard with that. I mean, I was just a kid. I mean, because here everybody knew our business, knew what was happening to us, and it was brutal. Oh my God, there's a school. If you go right up here, there's a turn, and you can situate it.
It's a tough thing back here.
Yeah. This is crazy. There were some good times though, like we'd have a good 30 minutes or so before we heard the sliding glass door open. And one day he came in and he actually had pizza, like supreme pizza. And another day, everything, it was fine. And another day he came in, for no reason, he just smashed my mom's head against that cabinet there. Just thinking of, just to the left of where they're playing, it's where my brother and I would play. My dad, he would come home and we had to be really good at sports and stuff, so. There's one time where we were sitting, I knew it was coming. I knew my brother, Bobby, I knew that he would be the one to bear the brunt of it. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Chad reminds me of a lot of the kids that come through here. Angry, very angry. And you could tell he just didn't want to connect with anybody. And you could tell he was hiding something. He always came in with a nervous stomach. My stomach hurts. And he finally came clean and told me his father had major anger issues. He said, you know, I need to talk to somebody. And I instantly thought of Coach Morrow.
Chad wasn't a football player per se. He was just a kid that had energy that needed to do something. He needed to be a part of something because I don't think he had anyone as a role model or someone showing him what to do. On the whistle,
Coach Morrow was the only person I really trusted in this town. He was always there.
Yeah. There was times I would give him a ride home. We would talk, sometimes we wouldn't talk. But it was interesting to have a discussion with someone, a young man who had no one to talk to.
He was the only one there for my graduation. Even my family wasn't there.
You're doing good. You're okay.
I just remember when you were walking across, I just remember looking up. He had this big old, just ear to ear grin.
It takes a village to raise a child. And it doesn't matter what nationality, what race, we're all from the human race. If you interact with someone, it shows them that you care.
Good memories, you know? You gotta hold on to those.
It's love thy neighbor. It's what we should do.
When's the last time you saw him?
About 8 years ago. And actually right over here is Lucille's barbecue. The best barbecue you'll ever have in your life. And Coach Morrow actually took me there, like after high school graduation. But take this right. It's gonna be your first right over there. Just pull in, not this one, but. I freaking knew it. I freaking knew it. I did too. I knew something was up.
No,
I knew something with that. I knew it. I knew y'all were doing something.
No, you did. There he is.
I heard you were in town. I knew you couldn't pass up some Lucille's, man. Oh, good to see you. I'm so proud of you. Done well. Done well.
If I can have the panel members come on up. Take it off. Okay, I'm going to introduce everybody to the panel first off and just tell you, why I'm so proud that they all agreed to be part of this important discussion. And hopefully you'll understand by the end of it why that video, I think, has such a tremendous impact, hopefully on all of you. First off, my friend and really mentor is Chief Renaud from Folsom PD. Chief Renaud was sworn in as the Chief of Police in Folsom in 2011 after having serving 20 years in the Long Beach Police Department. I didn't know this about her, but she's another brainiac. She not only has a bachelor's degree, but she has 2 master's degrees. She also happens to be the 4th vice president of an organization called the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which has 28,000 members worldwide. And in 2020, Sacramento County should be very proud that she's going to be the president of that association. So thank you, Chief, for being here. And Dr. Evans, I met, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We sat on the child death review team together. Tremendous respect for her. She's a pediatrician with Kaiser Permanente. She went to med school at USC. After graduating from med school, she completed her residency at the Los Angeles County and USC Medical Center. She continued to work in the county hospital in the violence intervention program, conducting evaluations for child abuse and neglect, and providing pediatric care for children in the dependency care system. As a longtime member of the Child Death Review Team, Dr. Evans helps that team investigate, analyze, and document circumstances of why children die in our community and provide our County Board of Supervisors with strategies that we can try to reduce those deaths in our community. She's also currently the Regional Medical Director of Child Abuse Services and Prevention for Northern California Kaiser Permanente, working to establish a more consistent and robust systematic response to child maltreatment and prevention. Thank you, Dr. Evans, for being here. Ms. Long. Thank you. Jose Bonda, I very much appreciate being here. He is the superintendent for Sacramento City Unified School District, which oversees 77 schools, 43,000 students, and 4,200 employees. Mr. Bonda has more than 30 years of experience in the education field, has a master's degree in educational leadership. He has successfully created focused approaches to student instruction, assessment, and interventions. He's also developed relationships with the business community, city government, and service organizations to help engage them in the importance of a child's education. Thank you, Mr. Bonda, for being here. Last but not least is Ian Levin. I met Ian maybe 6 to 8 months ago when I had the opportunity to do a tour of the Mac Road Partnership. So Ian is the Mac Road Partnership Community Center Manager. He is what I call a boots on the ground kind of guy. With more than 20 years of hands-on experience in youth development, Ian is personally committed to mentoring every child that walks through the doors of that community center. Not only does he facilitate various programs throughout the week, such as chess clubs and homework clubs, he also coaches for the Soccer for Success program in his spare time. He's built lasting relationships with youth, their parents, and community stakeholders, and continues to serve them through the Mac Road Partnership and the many programs that they have for our community. So thank you for being part of this panel. So I'm going to ask a question, and I'll just start off with Chief Renaud, and this is to the panel, is in your career, how would you see or have you seen trauma, whether direct or secondhand, impact a child's life?
Good afternoon, everyone, and Amory, thank you so much for asking me to join this. It really is a pleasure to work with you serving Sacramento County, and thank you for all that you do. So I think the first thing to say about trauma is to admit and understand that it impacts and affects children in all socioeconomic stratas and in all neighborhoods of our communities. Trauma can be both physical, but as we've also seen from this clip, very much emotional. So whether a child sees or experiences physical trauma, the emotional trauma that they can be exposed to from dysfunctional relationships and dysfunctional social settings can also impact them. In my career, as patrol officers, we get called into the most private of people's places, their own homes, for whatever personal crisis they might be dealing with or whatever situation has exploded and overrun the boundaries of their four walls of their house to the point where law enforcement is called into their home. And so we see things that other professions don't particularly see. And as it relates particularly to children and the effects of trauma on children, what we have seen in our careers as law enforcement officers is children who become withdrawn. They become unable to trust. They become unwilling to communicate. They don't talk, they don't engage, they don't bond. I remember being a young patrol officer handling a child abuse case, and we took the children from the home, and when we were working with Child Protection Services, you know, like all patrol officers do, I had a little kit in my car of things, comforting things to give, teddy bears, blankets, and I had what I thought was the most adorable teddy bear in the world that I tried to give to this child, and the child wouldn't take it. And I happened to mention that to the CPS worker, and she told me, she said, that's because children who are traumatized can't bond with anything or anybody because they don't trust, because they've been hurt too often. And so they won't even bond with a blanket, a stuffed animal, the way that probably all of our own children do. And with that effect of trauma, obviously, what does that then do to that person when they become a young adult in our society? And we see the results of that, particularly in the criminal justice system, when we end up dealing with them in other and in negative ways.
Both as victims as well as sometimes offenders.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Evans?
Thank you. So in my practice, I've seen the effects.
Hold it up close to you.
In my practice, I've seen the effects, both the long and short-term effects of trauma. I've seen it in clinical manifestations, more in terms of some non-specific complaints, chronic abdominal pain, headaches. I've seen it in terms of self-injurious behaviors such as cutting, eating disorders, obesity, anorexia, bulimia, as well as difficulty with social interactions, children who have difficulty making friends, and a lot of issues with acting out. A lot of mental health issues such as depression disorders, anxiety disorders, aggression disorders, ADHD. The effects of chronic long-term trauma have been well studied, and we know that this can cause chronic disease, such as cancers, heart disease, and also increases the risk of suicidality.
Superintendent Bonda?
Thank you. I unfortunately, having spent 36 years in public education, have had lots of opportunities to experience situations where students are going through trauma. But the one that really stands out for me was when I was a vice principal at Johansson High School in Modesto. And there was an incident reported in the classroom after school. I was called on the radio, come on over to, we're having some issues here. And I had a young man, he's only a sophomore, who, the best way I can describe it, he just lost it. He reached this point of just being stressed out, became over emotional, refused to leave the classroom, was defiant towards the teacher. And when my supervision folks got there, he actually attacked one of them, which was very uncharacteristic for this young man that I'd gotten to know, and had to be physically restrained, taken down to the ground. We had an SRO, a school resource officer, who was there, who could then had to arrest him, handcuff him, take him to juvenile hall. That could have been the end of the story. That's what often happens. Children then leave the system. They go to a point where now they have to deal with the juvenile court system. But I kept up with him. I actually went over to juvenile hall to visit him, had an opportunity to have a conversation. And then it turns out that in talking to him, what caused him to snap was his living conditions. He lived in a small trailer with just his mom and his brothers and sisters, but there were 2 more families that lived in that small trailer that all had to share that one place. And he said that he just had reached the point where he didn't have any as a teenager, he didn't have any time to be alone. He didn't have any peace and quiet. There were always kids running around. And it just kind of built up on him to the point where he just lost it. I was able to continue to keep track of him. Normally, again, the kids leave our system. It's really hard to come back in. But as the vice principal in charge of discipline, I provided opportunities and access points for him to come back. He had to do certain things. He was able to come back to our school system after a period of time of being expelled. He managed to get the schooling that he needed at juvenile hall. He managed to get some anger management counseling and some other supports, and then able to come back into the school system and be successful. But there are so many of those children like him that unless there's somebody there that's going to go the extra mile to support them and connect them with the supports, fall out of the system. And so I was very glad that this one young man was one of those that we could save. You can't save them all, I understand that, but it doesn't keep us from trying to make sure that we can give them hope. And I think that's the one thing I gave him. I gave him hope that he could come back and still be successful in a comprehensive high school setting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I started with the Mac Road Partnership 2.5 years ago. And on my very first day, I met a young lady named Sherelle. I pulled up in my vehicle, and I was getting my bag out of the car, and this 10-year-old girl came running over and introduced herself and asked who I was and what I was doing here, and I explained my position here. And what she said was, what can I do to help? How can I help you? And I didn't know at the time. I said, well, let's get to work. So she became my right-hand person, my clipboard holder, and she followed me around for 6 months, and we were very tight. A year after that meeting, on a beautiful summer afternoon, young man came in, was her older brother, and to the center looking fairly distressed, and he said, he looked at me and Sherelle got shot. And it took me a while for that to register. I didn't connect the two. We're talking about a 10-year-old girl, and for her to have been shot it broke me down. So I went immediately to where I heard this took place, and of course she did get shot. She was playing in her grandmother's front yard with 5 other kids, not one of them older age of 14. A gunman walked by, a young man pulled out a gun and opened fire on this group of kids. Sherelle was the only one that was hit, thank God. And her injuries, the bullet hit her leg, and physically she has recovered since that time, physically. But the scars, on her leg and in her mind are still there, and a lot's happened to her since that time. Her family has left the neighborhood. She has all the signs of post-traumatic stress disorder from this, nightmares, insecurities, mood swings. And I had a lot of anger at that moment and in the time leading, right after that. But then I started to think about the trauma that the gunman, this young man, must have experienced in his life to lead him to this decision. And it's a nasty cycle. And I think we're all here for the same, we have the same goals, and we want to affect it before that kind of tragedy happens, and then affect it after it does happen. And Sherelle still visits the center. She's going to be attending our Summer Night Lights program this year. I look forward to that. And her journey's just begun, just like all of us up here.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, how do you see your profession addressing the effects of this kinds of childhood trauma?
So for the law enforcement profession, most notably, of course, we are very proactive to protect children who are being abused, to take them out of homes where abuse is occurring and get them to the help that they need. And I think that is a job function that everybody knows law enforcement does. But there's so much more that law enforcement does and can do. And I think our Rotary Service Above Self Award really exemplified that. There is work that law enforcement does to be positive, proactive, mentor role models for these kids that is intangible, unquantifiable, and we can never prove that what we're putting our efforts and our energy into will work, because the only way you could statistically prove that is if you had a crystal ball or a time machine and you could prove that you saved this kid who would have become a criminal or gotten themselves into gangs or trouble, and that you saved them by taking them a different path. Even though we're unable to statistically prove that, we all know deep down, those of us who do that kind of work, we know that it's important. In the city of Folsom, we have some mentoring, role modeling kind of program things that we do to work with our children who maybe are in an at-risk population, or who we know have been traumatized from physical abuse, from emotional abuse, from a home that doesn't function as well as it should. And most notably, they're through our school resource officers and some programs that we run. We do a summer cop camp every year where we take a group of kids that have been recommended to us by the school district and who patrol officers have come across during the year that might need just a little bit of extra time with a positive adult in their life. And it's funded through the Folsom Police Foundation, but we take these kids for a week at a time, and the officers spend time with them. They take them to Sunsplash for a day. There's a day of sports camp. There's a day of bowling. Sometimes they go to a Rivers Cats game. And after Cop Camp in July, when National Night Out occurs, I always make sure that I go on the route that goes to the apartment complexes where I know these kids live, and then I wait for it. Because I go to National Night Out and I will get glommed with these kids who run up to me kind of holding on to my legs and talking about how cop camp was the best week of their life. As we all do in this room, and particularly, I can only speak for my own profession, but we have success story after success story of kids that we've helped and touched. And so that type of proactive work where it takes a village to raise a family is so important. One of the things that Anne-Marie and I have talked about as it pertains to the Family Justice Center concept here in Sacramento County, when Jan Scully began working on that in 2012, I had just come up from Long Beach, and I left Long Beach as the Investigations Division Commander, and Long Beach 2 was working on a Family Justice Center concept, and my child abuse sergeant came to me, who was very involved in that concept, and he said a quote that I will never forget. He said, "If you take the violence out of the family, you will take the violence out of the community." And as we look to stop trauma where it's happening to children, and then for law enforcement officers, as we look to repair the damage, we have to keep that in mind, that that's what we are all looking to do in our own ways, in our own professions, is to impact this issue so that if we take the violence out of the family, we will take the violence out of the community.
Thank you.
I think in the medical field, there's a lot of work being done to further understand the effects of toxic stress on brain development and long-term health, as well as what can be done to mitigate those negative effects. And a lot of that has to do with promoting resilience and strengthening families. And so there's a lot of work being done in terms of how we can do that as physicians and medical care providers. There's also a lot of work being done trying to understand why two individuals who experience the same trauma can be affected very differently by it. Again, that a lot of that goes back to the idea of resilience. And so if we can't always prevent the trauma, just working to figure out how we can promote parental resilience and strengthen the individual's reserves when they are faced with adverse situations. Clinically, we are also looking into screening for adverse childhood experiences and trying to figure out the best approach to this. It's being done in a number of centers, and we're still trying to find out what is the best approach and what is the best way to implement these screenings. And also, once these adverse childhood experiences are identified in the exam room, working to connect patients and families with community partners. And so those linkages are key. And that's one area where we really need to work together to keep kids safe and keep families strong.
Thank you.
Sacramento City Unified, we have a number of our schools that are in parts of the city where we have a high number of impacted youth and kids that are in crisis. And it's all related to their environment. They come from pockets of high poverty, gang violence, the gang influence that exists in their neighborhoods, where kids are pressured to either be a part or figure out a way to avoid it, right? Because, imagine having to worry about how you're going to get home because you may end up walking through the wrong territory on the way home. We have kids that are not receiving appropriate health care. They're lacking mental health, nutrition, food. We have what we refer to as deserts where there's no food, there's really not access to food and nutrition for them or medical supports. And so what we work on is to provide as many wraparound services within the school district as we can. We have crisis teams that are available to go out and deal with students. We have a Connect Ed center where students can be referred. We have specialized schools that where we can send students for a period of time that need more than just one session or two sessions, but need to be there for a while, where they're in small classroom environments with teachers that are trained to work with them and have the patience and the understanding that they need. And one of those is Success Academy and John Morris School. Very small schools, but play an essential role in providing the supports that our kids need. In fact, when I was at Success Academy about a month ago, one of the students was a fourth grader who had struggled at his school, didn't struggle prior to his being in a car and witnessing his father shot shot to death in one of these gang-related incidents. And so now we're having to try to put this fragile child back together again and hopefully be able to instill in him the skills and the self-management things that he would need to go on. And then we partner a lot with a lot of the agencies, and I can probably speak more to that later on, but we have a lot of relationships with community-based organizations, mental health, law enforcement. You know, our soon-to-be director of safety came from a law enforcement background. And she has done a great job of building those relationships, stronger relationships with law enforcement, probation, because they play a key role as well. So I think we look towards others to support the work that we do. We know that there's, unfortunately, the need of our students far outstrip the resources that we have, and so we continue to seek additional grant funding and partnerships to make sure that our students have that safety net that they need in order to thrive in our schools.
So we have a 4-acre lot where the center's located, and in 2.5 years we have built it out accordingly. So we're in the middle of a kind of an underserved area, low-income area. We have apartments surrounding our 4 acres. So some of the things the community wanted obviously was an athletic outlet for physical fitness. So an obstacle course went in, 2 full-length basketball courts that Kaiser, the Kings, and some other organizations pooled their resources together and built these courts pretty much overnight. We've got a beautiful playground. We now have a soccer field, which currently we have a great soccer league running with over 100 kids participating. And it's an affordable league as well. So fitness was one piece, and we wanted to bring that to these kids in this community. Now, programming is just as important as the fitness piece as well. So education, we wanted to make sure that kids that might be falling through the cracks scholastically had an additional outlet to study. So we created the Homework Assistance Lab, which kids can come in 3 to 5 or 5 days a week and can get help with whatever their homework needs may be. They sit down in a positive, nurturing environment, and we have on-site staff, volunteers that are there for them. You know, it's another resource for parents as well. So we take some of the burden so they can focus on earning that money and doing the things they need to do, and just an all-around assistance. On top of that, we've got Girl Scouts, and for the first time, there's 2 girls I want to talk about really quickly, Bug and Tweety, they're sisters. And Bug and Tweety this weekend, for the first time in their life, went camping. They'd never been really out of South Sacramento before, hadn't been to the beach, to the forest, and this weekend they went out with Troop 374, and they were out, and they had a ball. I mean, the troop leader sent me some wonderful pictures, and this was a new experience for these kids, and that's what it really comes down to, is we need to expose these kids to things they might not have a chance to, and open up doors in their minds to give them every opportunity, you know, that they can possibly get. So, you know, I teach a chess club there. Our team is the Nightmares with a K. And if anybody's looking for a game, please come down. I invited Senator Pan down. I'll kick your butt. But you know, there's no clear line or path to take to healing trauma. There's a lot of avenues you're going to need to find a solution. You're going to walk them all until something sticks. So.
Thank you. Okay, last question is how can we as a community work together to protect kids from trauma, assist those who have already been traumatized, and strive to create a healthier, stronger community?
Be involved and give of yourself outside of your profession, of your own time if necessary. Open your heart and care, and know that when you do, it's going to hurt. And you're going to become involved in ways that will probably take a toll on you as well. I'll give one example of an officer on my department who has become very much a recognized mentor, role model for the youth in the community. I was standing next to him one day, and a middle school child ran up and gave him a letter, and he and I were talking, and so he just casually opened the letter, and I was standing close enough to him that we were reading it together, and it was a child that told him, you saved my life because you came to my school and had lunch with me in the cafeteria when all the other kids are mean to me and won't talk to me, and I was going to kill myself, but because of you, I'm not going to, and I'm going to be a good person. This officer literally got goosebumps on his arm, and we had this wonderful feel-good moment, and everything was great. So a couple of years later, like you were saying, you have to just try a path until it works and know that you're not going to cure trauma, the effects of it, in one shot. And so this child, again, was suffering from depression and did try and harm himself, and called my officer in the middle of the night because he had invested that deeply in these kids that they have his cell phone number. And I watched the pain on his face because he personally invested in that child. So he helped the child through again. So I think the answer to the question is we have to invest, we have to help, we have to give of ourselves, and we have to know that when we do, it's going to hurt us as well.
I think it's important to continue to educate ourselves and our colleagues about trauma and the effects of trauma, and to support our colleagues to understand that this is difficult work, and to recognize burnout in ourselves as well as our colleagues, I think is very important when we're doing this kind of work. When we see a child who's acting out, I think it's important to avoid labeling them as a bad child and really get curious about that. I think when you're in the heat of the moment, it can be a little bit difficult, but to really understand what must be going on at home for this child, and ask yourself, has this child been abused? I think it's really important to just try to come from a place of understanding when you're working with parents as well, and trying to understand how we can support them to meet the needs of their child. I think it's also very important to remember that a child of any age can be affected by trauma. So even infants can be affected by trauma. So we don't want to make the mistake of assuming that a child is too young to be impacted.
For the school district, we have highly trained folks, but again, there's never enough of them to go around. So we do rely on our partnerships and our relationships with others. We have school resource officers at every high school, and then they also, a number of them that work with our middle schools. And they bring a tremendous resource. So I think for us, it's incumbent that we be willing to turn towards the experts. School resource officers are not just there to police our students, but they're there to also provide supports and build those relationships and build trust with our students. Much like education, we need to make sure that we have folks that can recognize what trauma is in a student. That would be classroom teachers, that would be office people. Need to be able to recognize what that is, be able to respond to what it is, and make sure that there's follow through with our students that are having moments where they need those extra support. So I think for us it's just continuing to coordinate and continue to expand those, but there are experts in this room here today that we can call on, and we should be willing to call on for help in supporting our kids, and make sure that they have everything they need, again, to be able to thrive, be happy, be able to learn, be able to succeed as students, because then that clears the path for them to be successful adults.
So a while back I met a young man, he introduced himself as Swerve, and I know. And Swerve and he's a young man from the neighborhood. When I first met him, was 21 years old. And we butted heads a couple times based on his behavior, his attitude, and things of that nature. I invited him to a professional golf tournament. And on that outing, we had a great conversation. And I got to know, his real name is Jamal. That's what we're going to call him now. Jamal opened up to me about his life, and it didn't surprise me at all after hearing what he had told me about this is why he behaves the way he does. He grew up in foster care, had some very negative experiences in that care, and has had no support group other than some toxic energy around him. I was struggling with him though. I couldn't make a deep connection to get him to change his ways, and you know, some people were wanting me to give up, and I would never do that. So Jamal is hanging on my finger, and I can't hold him up, and then a man came to work at the center. His name is Dino Alliger, and he runs what's called the Mobile Bicycle Repair Workshop. If you haven't heard about it, it's pretty amazing. Dino comes to our center twice a week and sets up a repair shop. Kids and community members can come in, and if they have a problem with their bike, Dino fixes it for them. While he's fixing it, he teaches them, he brings them back, and he makes them kind of like the mechanic. And so, you know, last year, Dino we gave out over 100 bikes to our community members. Jamal, I introduced him to Dino, and Jamal's a very talented young man. He's very smart, got great energy, but he just hasn't, no one's told him that. He's kind of stuck like, this is me and this is who I'm gonna be. But Dino started a fire with him, like the kid has skills, and that started to motivate him, and he had a different energy. Now law enforcement helps support that program. Dino gets bikes from PD, and he refurbishes them and gives them back out. Now, 2 officers have been coming down to our center as part of an outreach, and it's been great. Sergeant Sood, I believe is his name, one of them, and Officer Park. Now, they met Jamal, and they created a relationship, and they kind of found out some of his additional, or some of the things that I had found out. Now, these guys took Jamal under their wing. And so Jamal didn't have a license, he didn't have a social security card, and he didn't have a job. In a very short period of time between Dino and law enforcement and myself working with this kid, in the last 4 months, Jamal is now, he's in the Regional Conservation Corps. He's taken out his piercings. He goes by Jamal. I called him Swerve by accident the other day, and he's like, who are you talking to? Fair enough. So now this young man he's in the Regional Conservation Corps. These officers drove him to, 7 in the morning to get him there on time. Now the kid is getting up, taking the bus. They've got bus passes for this young man, and he's doing this on his own. He quit marijuana. As I said, he took out the piercings. He's going by his given name. And the energy and the stuff coming off this kid is amazing. And it wasn't just one person. Now, so he was on my pinky, then Dino comes in, law enforcement. Now he's being held up by a group of people. And for the first time in his life, he's got support that he's never felt. And it's coming from all angles. And right now, he'll call me on my phone and just ask a random question. He's doing this, these other guys are picking up their phone, and I think we all hit on it earlier. You have to go the extra mile. You cannot shut the door on these kids. It's gonna be a long haul, and it's gonna be frustrating. But the moment you give up, you failed. You failed. And so what we're seeing here, and I know Jamal's gonna, regress, progress, but the bottom line is we're gonna be here to see that he keeps going, and we're going to keep holding him up. So.
Thank you. So how about a big round of applause for our panel? Thank you all for being here. So a little bit different, but I think it's an important conversation, and I think it's something that, while the video may be a little bit kind of hard to watch and sad in many ways, and the conversation of the panel is often a challenging conversation. I think the most important thing that we can walk away with today is hope. and inspiration by people like the very folks that are on this panel, and honestly the folks that are in this room. And I'm going to leave it on this note today, and thank you all for coming, but for probably over 20 years, long before I got lucky and got this job and was a line prosecutor, I had a quote in my office that just sat there, and it still does, which is a very simple phrase, which is, each of us, whether we have anything to do with children or not, are directly affected by how they are treated. And when you think about the different professions in this room, which I would venture to guess is pretty much every profession that touches a child's life, criminal justice, child welfare, healthcare, business, faith-based, community-based organizations, law enforcement. Every one of those professions is touched by how a child is raised and how they're treated. And so the goal of the panel today was to get us outside our individual professional silos and understand that the crossover between our professions is really not that great. And if we can continue to work together and have these conversations, then I'm very confident that we as a community will raise healthier children and ultimately have a safer community. And with that, I want to just thank you all for being here. It's another great year. Hope you have a great Cinco de Mayo and be safe out there. So thank you very much.